so we can go ahead and get going. But to reiterate for those folks who are just entering the room, and I'm going to make Jason re-record his context a little bit later. We just learned in the last day or so that as of on March 1st, that the greater majority of our classes and services will move to online. And that faculty at this point don't need to do anything relative to the waiver at this point in time, but we actually think it's still important to go through these MOUs. Think of this as us getting a jump start on spring 2022. So, but we will answer as we go through, because I think that there are other issues that are sort of embedded that we need to talk about relative to reopening. I also want to acknowledge that a number of our union board members and our executive director here. So Robert Proney, the executive director of LRCFT, is here. A number of our board members that I've seen sort of very quickly, and I'm probably going to miss a few. I saw Jackie Onate from counseling at SCC. I saw Matthew Register from ARC Mathematics, and I might have just been making up his department. Sorry if I was wrong. And I think a few other people might have come in. And I also, just in advance, also want to thank Julie Oliver, District Academic Senate President, for also joining us here today. So let's go ahead and get started. And I'm going to go ahead and share. I'm going to go in a particular order. I'm going to start with classroom faculty and work our way through all of those pieces. Jason, are you seeing a lot of the admit people coming through, or do I have you listed as a co-host?
Yeah, I'll take care of that, as well as try to answer any questions that come in the chat.
Absolutely. So if you have questions, please feel free to put it in the chat. Both Robert and Jason could try to answer them as they come up. And of course, I have 500 windows open at the same time, and none of the ones that I need. Give me a second here. I apologize. Okay. So for classroom faculty, as you know already, in our existing contract, we can already do up, if you're tenured, you can do up to 0.8 agreements. What this MOU effectively does is tell all tenured and tenure track faculty and long-term temp classroom faculty that they can opt to be 100% online in fall 2021. 1.A on this particular MOU becomes irrelevant as of March 1st from our understanding, because the greater majority of our classroom faculty are actually going to probably be put on online. We expect that also to be true of our part-timers as well. There are some other pieces of this MOU that give you some flexibility and options should you choose to exercise it. Per our MOU, you can use what we call your accumulated overload, or any basically overload classes that you've been saving to use for type C leave. You can use that to reduce part of your teaching load for fall 2021. That all regular, and that if we were going back face-to-face, you would be allowed to do all of your office hours online. You are expected to meet all of your service and professional development obligations, and all scheduled performance reviews will move forward for all tenured and tenured track faculty in fall 2021 according to the contractual timelines. I want to note that what I want to remind folks of something that we said probably last semester is that essentially everybody's review period has gone from being 3 years between reviews to 4. So this coming fall, in fall 2021, we're actually going to be reviewing the people who were scheduled to do their performance review in fall 2020. That's for tenured faculty. As most of you know, if you are tenure track or long-term temporary faculty, you already had to be reviewed. We're not, by ed code, we are not allowed to stop the clock or stop evaluations. You must be evaluated. So for those of you who are on the tenure track, there's no change. You're still being reviewed. For those of you who are tenured, everything's going to move up a year. We've already put in the request and asked for a time to, we've asked for a list of everyone's new scheduled review dates. We hope to have that list in hand by April. We've actually asked for it to be posted in e-services similar to the preference report. for part-timers, but we don't have information on that yet. But know that we do expect to be able to distribute, or we'll ask the deans to distribute the new dates for your reviews so you know what your new date is. In moving forward with the performance reviews, you should know that the expectation is that these reviews will be online and follow the online format, which will be including a premium regarding workstation reviews and meeting regular and effective contact. We really want to encourage you. We know that a number of you are new to this. We really want to encourage you to avail yourself of the very robust offerings regarding professional development in this regard. But we talked about in the previous meeting, to the best of our ability as union and working with our Senate colleagues to try to put together sort of a list of best practices to help make visible and answer some of those questions regarding the performance review process. So the online performance review process is already in the contract, and you can look it up, and maybe I could ask Robert if you could put the article number. I can't remember it off the top of my head, where it outlines the online review. But that's where we're at with the classroom faculty. So let me pause there and see if there are any questions. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see everybody. Do we have any questions?
Yeah, one question regarding performance review delayed by 1 year. That's been answered.
Okay, good. So basically everyone's going to get shifted up, and it'll be 3 years after that. So it'll be 4 years this next time for you, and then 3 years after that.
And to reiterate, it does appear that the district will announce by March 1st that only impossible to convert courses will be offered on ground in the fall.
Yolanda, I'm not. Do you or will you have an idea via surveys the desires of this group? I'm desires regarding going online, or desires regarding. I just need a little clarification there. If you can let me know.
No, I just hearing Jason say that there's already been kind of a decision coming out on the 1st. I think that answers the question.
Okay.
Because often student service faculty, they're kind of seeing what instruction is going to do, because we kind of work together. So that was my question. But it looks like most people are going to opt to 100, not 0.2 or 4 or anything like that.
Well, and at this point, I think actually it's not even going to be a choice. It's just that the safety of our workers cannot be guaranteed, and it's a liability issue. We want to be kind of clear about that. A couple things I want to stay outright, because I know I want to acknowledge, it's important to acknowledge that our faculty have diverse interests in terms of whether to come back or not, vaccinations, all that kind of stuff. And I know that we've all been reading the newspapers regarding the politics of what's going on in K-12. As a union, we've opted towards faculty flexibility, and that's not a political decision. It's about, on the one hand, knowing that the public health decision is out of our hands. We will only, we are following the guidelines of Sacramento County and about whether or not our faculty, staff, and students can come back and be safe. I think second, the other piece of it for us has been, because we understand our faculty have very divergent interests, is we've left the choice to opt out or opting to teach online up to the faculty members as much as possible. So hypothetically, if we're really looking more towards a spring reopening, we'll revisit these MOUs, and at least in my hope is that it's going to be very similar, that it then becomes your choice as a faculty member, a full-time faculty member, whether or not you're teaching in online or back face-to-face or some combination. We also want to note that specifically for classroom faculty in those classes, is that we will be under a local DE emergency addendum. So you will not have to run your curriculum through the curriculum committee in order to be able to teach online. But that's not to say that if you want to teach online in spring, that the same thing will happen. The original versions of these MOUs originally said that you must have a DE, a non-emergency DE designation. So if we are not under an emergency in spring, you are still in the same situation. that is state law. It is non-negotiable. And so that's important for your department to think about. That if you know, and for some of us, I work in a department where all of our curriculum is already okayed for all 3 modalities, but I know that's not true of all departments. I just want to be sort of clear that the go ahead is for fall and only, right? And that that is not something we can negotiate for you regarding whether you follow that curriculum or not. Second, I think also I think in terms of the classroom, faculty, and I think that it's important just to say it out loud. And I'm just realizing is the recording going? Okay, yeah, the recording is going. I think that for us within the union, we also know that there are some very specific programs that have very specific needs that don't fit neatly into the MOUs or even into the discussions of reopening. And Jason and I attended a very informative meeting with our faculty, our deaf studies faculty from across the district. I think it was yesterday, it might've been 2 days ago. Like most of you, all my days are starting to blend together. Where Jason and I actually had to check our hearing privilege and also understand the very specific needs of faculty. And so if you are in a program that may have very specific needs, that kind of stuff, it's really helpful for us if you have a group across the district that may want to have a conversation with us. We are open to those conversations. The only way that we can negotiate in good faith for a lot of our programs, et cetera, if we have the knowledge that we need to negotiate on your behalf, right? So we're aware that there's theater arts is another group example who might have specific needs, et cetera. So I want to sort of acknowledge that on the front end. Were there any other sort of remaining questions regarding classroom and classroom faculty reopening?
We've caught up in the chat.
Great. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to.
I have a quick question. My name's Rich. I'm in KHA. Hey, I have a question. So we're being required, it looks like, to come back here in the next potentially couple of weeks to resume competition and get back on the field. But the one thing that's not being addressed from the district side is how travel is going to happen. And what they're asking us to do is to drive our own selves at this point. So I'm fine driving myself. Is the district going to be providing transportation and vehicles? Am I paying for myself to travel to all the games that we have to go to? Do you know, was there any conversation about how that's going to work out? I mean, since my classroom is an outdoor classroom.
That's come up. Yeah, that came up for brief discussion. The district seemed to be confused about the travel component for coaches, and we'll bring this up with them.
Thank you.
And Rich, will you please also maybe email Jason and myself, like if there are very specific concerns, I'm assuming, in just listening to your question, sounds like reimbursement, who's in charge of travel for students, those kind of things. If you know that, then it makes it a little, we can make sure that we get very specific answers as well.
I can do that. I mean, the one thing that's been discussed, or my understanding, is that the students are going to travel themselves based on waiver, but from a faculty standpoint, transportation's already been done, typically done, and we have 28 games and 14 will be on the road. So I'm just really trying to get a base on what my expectations are from me at that point. So I'll send you an email.
Great, yeah. And I mean, just historically, we do have some provisions in the contract that have talked about mileage and reimbursement. So like I said, if you send us an email, we'll work on that. So
thank you.
We're happy to do that. So let me go ahead and go to the counselors, coordinators, and librarians. One thing I do want to note as I'm opening this up is that it's important to note that the title of coordinator is sort of a catch for a lot of different groups. And so there is a specific call out here when I get to it that that this particular MOU that I'm about to show you does not, that there's two particular coordinators that will be in the sort of impossible to convert or essential duties category. So one of the things that I think is really important to note relative to our counselors, librarians, actually all of our non-classroom faculty, under the current contract, you cannot work remote at all. The historic argument, and I've learned this from my predecessor as Jason, has been that they didn't think that you could necessarily do your jobs remotely. One thing we've learned is that in this pandemic, and if there is a weird silver lining, is that that is absolutely not true. one thing we're very clear about when it comes to counselors across the district is that they have less escalations now in this online modality than when they were face-to-face. So in this very sort of bizarre way, we've learned some things that needed to be, or I was gonna say, you know, that the district has seen evidence of the effectiveness of our counseling and faculty, our lawyer and coordinators, et cetera. We are, for those of you who have paid attention to some of the contract negotiations that we're continuing, we are in active negotiations in the Joint Committee on Impact of Technology. We are actively negotiating the ability to try to find some parity for our non-classroom faculty to be able to also opt, through mutual agreement, opt to teach some of their load online, just like classroom faculty do. I will not be able to update that until much later in the semester, but I just want to let you know that all these things sort of end up tying it together. So for counselors, regular counselors, LTT counselors, and any counselors that are in categoricals, you can opt to work up to 100% of your assignment remotely during fall 2021. That's a 0.2 to a 1.0. You will be scheduled for student contact hours and office time and must fulfill all of your service obligations. You can opt to work all or part of your overall assignment remotely. And you can also opt to teach your HCD courses online. In order to reduce part of your load for fall 2021, you're allowed to use your accumulated overload. Again, this is any overload you may have banked to be able to move towards a type C leave. And then again, performance reviews forward for all tenured and tenure track counselors, counseling faculty for fall 2021, and it will follow the format of reviews that were already agreed upon in fall 2020. We will make sure that we post the PowerPoint from the, and I believe we also have a link to the recording of the training that Jamie and I did, I believe it was in September, that will show you what would be expected of you in terms of an online counseling review. Any questions about counseling at the moment?
We've caught up in the chat.
Cool. I'm gonna keep moving and people can just keep asking in the chat or ask out loud when I get to the end. Similar to the counselors, librarians and LTT librarians can opt to work 100% of their assignment online or remotely during fall 2021. You could also opt to work all or part of your overload assignment remotely as well. Participation in work requiring contact with students or patrons is voluntary. There's been no decision made about whether the libraries will open in any capacity for students and patrons. For those of you, most of you know that our librarians don't just serve students, but the public as well. No decision has been made on that. And that's why that clause is there, is that we have a number of librarians who have concern about, about having to serve the public if there are glass and other sort of safety measures in place. Regular librarians and LTT librarians can opt to work all or part of your overload assignment remotely. You can also reduce part of your load via accumulated overload or anything you put towards type C leave. You must fulfill all your college service obligations. And then again, performance reviews will move forward for all tenured and tenure track librarians. And it will also follow the review process that we did in fall 2020. Any questions on librarians? I'm now realizing the mistake of having drank coffee right before this presentation, so I apologize like I do to my students if I'm talking too fast. Looks like we're good to go. So for regular coordinators and LTT coordinators, with the exception of CTE coordinators and faculty athletic coordinators, regular coordinators and LTT coordinators can also opt to work up to 100% of their assignment remotely during fall 2021. As noted, CTE coordinators and faculty athletic coordinators are going to be covered in the next MOU. Participation in work requiring contact with students is voluntary. So for example, at SCC, CRC, and ARC, for example, Puente and Emoja programs are often right next to common space areas where you interact with students. That would be considered voluntary. Regular coordinators can also work to work all or part of their overload remotely. In order to reduce part of your load for fall 2021, I'm sorry, I'm repeating myself. You can use your overload, and then you do still have your same college service obligations, and performance reviews will also move forward for all tenured and tenured track coordinators. I just realized that we signed the wrong one. That should actually say coordinators there on F, but we'll correct that later. Any questions on anything regarding this group?
I just had one question, like what would an online workstation observation consist of?
So for is there a particular group or just all of them?
For coordinator, I belong to one of the coordinator groups.
So a lot of it, so the online workstation may be that if you run a training of some sort or that kind of thing, they might observe one of your trainings. We've also in that particular group, if I know that a number of our coordinators have to write grants or do compliance stuff with grants so they could submit transcripts of the work that they've done. But basically we have a kind of, and I'll post it later, but basically it's that you're just going to demonstrate the work you would normally do in person. For librarians, they've submitted transcripts of work that they did at the research desk, that sort of thing. So a lot of it's just like demonstrating that you've met your professional responsibilities. That's sort of the number one thing for us.
Yeah, I teach one class also on load, not as overload. So I assume that could be
Exactly.
something. Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, and I think that's true for a lot of folks in the coordinator librarian category. That if it's part of your regular load, absolutely that can be part of your review. And that one of the things that we'll have to roll out a training relative to these online reviews in general if you're scheduled for review. But we would talk through like these are some of the things that you would observe. You would agree to it beforehand with your performance review team committee that you would say these are the materials that we are going to review relative to my online review. So we expect the conversation to happen in your very first meeting with your performance review team. And that's how it occurred this past fall.
Do you have any idea when we would need to let our deans know what we want to do for fall? Like whether we want to be all remote or partially remote? Because it seems like things are always changing, with the COVID picture. So at what point do we need to let them know?
Jason, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, the district by March 1st will send out an announcement to all faculty indicating the degree to which fall will be on ground versus online. And at that point, then your dean will be in touch with you for your particular, or chair for your particular preference to stay online or teach something on ground. As I mentioned earlier, only impossible to convert courses will be offered in the fall on ground.
And like I said, for a lot of these things, we're really looking at, this is probably more stuff that we have to worry about a little bit more for spring. There is a possibility in some of these categories, if the numbers get better, there's been some limited discussion of what happens if they get better in the second 8 weeks of fall semester. We're still going to hold that it's your choice, and these are in place. But if you decided as a faculty member, particularly if you're a coordinator, counselor, or librarian, that you felt okay coming back and they asked the question, you have, it's absolutely your choice if you change your mind. But obviously, for classroom faculty, it's different because once we're scheduled, we're locked in. For these others, there's been discussion, but given that we're still in purple now, and they can project yellow all they want, but until we see vaccines and all that other stuff, we just can't really tell. So I wouldn't necessarily be surprised that if they move towards wanting to do some low level of reopening of services that you would be asked, but these MOUs are still in place for you. So you can still remain 100% online if that's what you opted to do and come back. The one thing that I think actually is also pertinent for classroom and non-classroom faculty that I think Jason and I mentioned in the last one, but is actually we should mention now, is that there's definitely been some strong support and inclination that if we move out of this purple area and lower into the red, that we as faculty would have access to be able to work from our. Jason might know a little bit more about the office discussion than I do, but
Yeah, we've been talking to the district about faculty using their offices to teach from, not seeing students physically, but to Zoom from. There's a positive response from the district on that point, although there is some complications to it. We're also discussing with the district the idea of faculty, for example, in chemistry, Zooming from the lab without any students being there.
yeah. So it's still a work in progress, but there is a possibility. We've heard strong interest, literally, really from two different groups of folks. One, those who do kind of very technical labs, especially related to some of the online CTE courses and sciences, and then the other group being those with young children at home who would like to be able to work from their office a little bit to increase productivity. I guess that's what I'm going to call it, or have some quiet time. Either way you want to look at it. So just so you know, that's one of those sort of pieces that's still in play, and we'll update as we move forward. Mike, is it Michael or Michelle?
It's Michael Chappelle. I have a quick question on the ADA forms. Does that allow you to use it for someone who has a pre-existing condition in the home that you're working for, or is the person actually filling the form out have to have the pre-existing condition? How does that work? How does a district look at those types of situations?
I believe it has to be the individual, but Robert, under ADA, it has to be the employee, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, so they will not account for the person in the home, which is why we actually originally started negotiations on these waivers, because we also know that there are a lot of our faculty who are primary caregivers for people in those categories.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. I think this is an important question that Anita asked in the chat box here regarding that there's been a lot of discussion regarding updating the ventilation systems, especially in the older buildings. And as Jason noted, the district informed us that the HVAC systems will be modified and filters replaced by the time we reopen. And as we noted previously, it'll only be a limited reopen in the fall. The other piece I was also going to note about our offices, that if we choose to use our offices, one of the sort of discussion points is you yourself, right, will probably be charged with, like, wiping it down, the sort of cleaning pieces of it. And I also want to reiterate, our union's position is that we do not want to force our classified and other administrative, but particularly classified bargaining units into having to come back either, right? And we're all part of an ecosystem. Their health is tied to our health is tied to theirs, and vice versa. And same with our students. And so part of it for us is understand that any opening of even the offices has downstream effects. So that's also from a liability perspective thing to that we have to focus in on, and we want to be, we want to be good citizens of the Los Rios colleges and not make decisions that disproportionately affect our colleagues in other bargaining units. Okay, any other questions here? The offices, there will be, so in terms of the offices, they talked about hypothetically, because we haven't had the full rollout discussion of it, they do plan to, before this happened, there would be a deep clean of all the buildings under the sort of protocols. But if you choose to use your office, at least the initial understanding we have is that you yourself would be charged with making sure that you upkeep and they will also give you all of the cleaning supplies that you would need. Jason, am I forgetting something there?
No, yeah, offices will require some attention by faculty to cleaning up their own space.
Let's see. So I'm going to go ahead and move on, and we can, and Jason and I are also happy to hang out afterwards to answer questions. I'm going to cover, now I'm going to go move on to covering coaches, nurses, and oops, let me get to the right one. Here we go. Coaches, nurses, and then the CTE coordinators. So as noted in the previous comment, the full-time coaches are going to be required to work in person for some of their essential activities, namely competition. Here, what we were in the situation of doing is trying to make sure that anything that you've been allowed to do online, that you could still do online. So for full-time coaches, as well as full-time faculty athletic coordinators, which my understanding is that a lot of campuses, they're called directors. But according to HR, that is not their official designation as faculty. So we're using the formal HR designation. Related to the essential activities as outlined in Article 845 and 846, you would be required to work in person for your essential activities related to your professional responsibilities. This can be included, but it's not limited to working on ground to conduct games, management, coordinating officials, coaching your students. And you also have to, there was also going to be compliance with CCC AA bylaws. Coaches and athletic coordinators may teach any portion of their professional responsibilities online that have been determined to be eligible to teach online. This includes duties that are part of their overload. So we are aware that some teach like conditioning classes or activity classes. These things can be taught online. That you may opt to do some sort of online piece of your coaching, your conditioning coaching for your students online. And this is determined by your faculty member. What's important to note is that these units must be clearly labeled in the syllabus as being taught online. So when you give your syllabus to your athletes, it must say that it's being done online. You can also do all of your office hours and other parts of your duties that can be done online. Any classes that you teach would be listed in the schedule as partially online. In order to reduce part of your load for fall 2021, regular full-time coaches and faculty athletic coordinators are allowed to use accumulated overload. Again, that's that type C leave you might be banking. You have to meet your college service and professional development obligations, and performance review will go forward for tenured and tenure track coaches and faculty athletic coordinators, and it will follow the format of the review from fall 2020. Again, as noted earlier, we will send a link to the old recording, and we will be in contact with chairs and or deans as needed to figure out if we need to update parts of this. But I'm going to push that down the line because we just need to get through a lot of the reopening stuff first. And in reality, that there are no evaluations going on until fall, so we have a little bit of time there. Our intention, though, is to make everything as transparent as possible before we all leave for summer break. So for regular tenured and tenure track college nurses, nursing faculty, long-term temp nursing faculty, they're required to work in person for essential activities related to their professional responsibilities as outlined in 844 of the CBA. So any portion of a college nurses or nursing faculty's professional responsibilities that can be done remotely may be done remotely. That also includes their overload. I should also note, although I realize it's missing from the MOU here, if you're teaching something with a syllabus and you're going to do it online, so for example, if you have a theory portion of what you're teaching to a practicum, you need to note on the syllabus that part will be taught online. In order to reduce part of your load in fall 2021, you can also opt to use your accumulated overload or type banked type C. College nurses and nursing faculty are expected to meet all college service and professional development obligations, and that performance reviews will move forward for all tenured and tenure tracked college nurses, nursing faculty, and LTT nursing faculty. We are aware that there have been some critical hires authorized at a couple of the campuses for nurses. And so if we have any of the college nurses here or nurses that are working in those departments, keep us apprised of how we can best support those new faculty through this process, because onboarding in this situation can definitely be difficult. Any questions that I'm missing here, Jason, that I need to talk about?
No, we've caught up. If your question hasn't been answered, please resend it or ask it. Thank you.
Okay, so then for regular CTE coordinators and LTT coordinators, CTE coordinators that are required to work in person they'll be required to work in person for any essential activities related to their professional responsibilities that are outlined in Article 845. Any portion of your responsibilities Activities that can be done remotely at the discretion of the coordinator. I want to note that throughout all of the collective bargaining MOUs that we've listed here, whenever and wherever possible, we've given faculty the autonomy to choose, right? This is about, for us, this is about academic freedom and making sure that you're the one who is able to do this. But of course, obviously, we want to make sure that you are also thinking about your students as you move this forward. So again, outlined in your syllabus and those types of work as needed. For these CTE coordinators, you can reduce your load using banked accumulated overload. You are expected to meet your college service and professional obligations. Here's the piece that is different for you, and this is also in there for impossible to convert programs, is that for regular faculty who are CTE coordinators, you can load balance 0.2 of your load that cannot be taught online. And that's given to you automatically. You can literally say, look, I'm in a load balance, and so I will pay it back, or I will teach extra in the following summer or fall. You can also load balance up to 0.4 of your load that cannot be taught online by mutual agreement with your area dean. So both of you have to agree to this. You can load balance through fall 2022. So basically, you are owing classes to Los Rios, so you would have 3 semesters at this point to pay that back or to balance out your load. And then again, for everyone in this category, performance reviews are going to move forward. Any questions?
We've caught up.
Hold on a second. I make it to the right one. All right, for faculty who are teaching impossible to convert. So it's important to note that this impossible to convert programs have been designated by the district and have been in place, I believe, since last March, April. So there's nothing new. This is all the groups that many, I think, in art, or I think also welding is another example, that we were just not able to convert any of our classes to being able to be taught online. So faculty teaching in these programs, faculty can teach in the online modality any of the modules or parts of courses that can be taught online as determined by the faculty member. Let me use the example of my colleagues here at SEC in cosmetology. They have, many of them have worked to be able to teach particular parts of their curriculum online, but there is applied, as an applied piece, I was saying, like, chemical treatment of hair, and Peter Wong is going to kill me if I didn't get that right, but something like that may need more hands-on, like this is how you do it, because I don't think we want any of our hairdressers to not have practical experience on using, with those chemical processes if they're doing our hair. But any of those things may have to be done in person, right? So for those things that can be done online, you just need to clearly put it in your syllabus that you will be teaching online. The course schedule will list the course as partially online. You can opt to hold all of your office hours online. You can also use any accumulated overload to reduce part of your teaching load for fall 2021. And then regular faculty teaching classes and programs labeled impossible to convert can load balance 0.2 of their load that cannot be taught online. And it can be up to 0.4 with agreement of your dean. And again, you'll have up until the end of fall, you'll have through fall 2022 to pay back whatever you load balance. And scheduled performance reviews will go forward with this group. This is the group that's going to be continually under discussion that Jason and I talked about in what capacity, will they come back? What are the safety measures? There are a lot of still unknowns here, and we just want to be upfront that that's part of the next part of the negotiations for us. That includes everything regarding safety, safety conditions, understanding what is social distancing going to be like. Are there going to be any modifications to class caps? All of those are still question marks, and I want to be honest about that. We will be in conversation with that, and there's parts of this that are not in the House of the Union, that there are also pieces of this that we need to consult with our Senate counterparts who take care of academic and professional matters. So those are some of the pieces that I want to sort of be upfront about for these impossible to convert classes. We've heard loud and clear from a number of our colleagues teaching in this area the desire to come back. So the question for us now becomes, what are those realistic numbers? What is the ask of faculty, et cetera? So there's still a number of, this I guess under the reopening plan as put out by the district committee was in the category of under discussion. And so if you or your programs across the district have specific needs, please make sure to email us so that we can best address those questions and as they come up. So as you can tell, we've been trying to work. It's been a little bit of a moving bus for us in terms of trying to make sure we negotiate the best we can on your behalf. But I'm happy to answer any general questions about this, about reopening any of the MOUs, or any other concerns that you have. We are happy to sort of answer those questions.
We've caught up in the chat.
Any other questions?
Belinda, I have a question that is kind of general. I think maybe everyone, or at least a lot of people, would benefit from hearing the answer. How can full-time faculty learn how much accumulated overload they have? Because the district doesn't send out those forms very often, and I was trying to find mine and they haven't sent me one for a long time.
We will make a request of that. I'm Robert, and Robert, can you write that down for us to see if there's a way in which we can get a list, or if it's in e-services somewhere? We are aware that it is not on our pay stub, which would have been really nice, but we will work on that. Orny, I think I have you in the queue, and then I have Lauren and Craig.
Yeah, mine is really quick. To the faculty member who asked that question, if you don't want to wait, the immediate person who will have the answer is your administrative assistant, because she or he will have to put in the FTE for you every semester. So that person should have your information immediately. Thank you.
Thanks, Ornette. And for those, I'm assuming most of you at ARC already know that Ornette is your LRCFT campus president, and I appreciate her being here to help answer those questions as well.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I think it was Lauren and Craig. Is that who I had in that order? I'm gonna go in that order. Lauren.
Thank you. I had a question going back to load balancing. For smaller departments, we would still need to do something with that FTE, because if we don't teach a section of a class and we underutilize FTE, or the FTE disappears, it might not be there again when we come back around the next time, correct?
Correct. So that's where we would, my understanding of how it works, and someone else correct me, is that if you decide to load balance, that FTE would go towards, actually I shouldn't answer that. I was like, it could be potentially offered towards your part-timers if you have part-timers in the department, but that may depend on each different campus. But I think that is part of the discussion. Jason or Robert, anyone else have other?
No.
On that? But you can, Lauren, you can also just shoot us an email, and we could try to search for additional, depending on which campus you're from, we could ask the question regarding from the workload committees that we have going at each campus, and answer and try to get you a specific answer.
Okay, thank you.
Craig.
Yeah, sorry about that. I came in a little late, and I'm not sure I caught this or not, but I think I heard Jason say that we are now officially or unofficially only going to be talking about impossible to convert classes. Is that what I heard for the fall?
Jason.
Correct. Yeah, correct. Impossible to convert courses, the district has told us, will be the courses offered on ground only in the fall.
And what, I mean, is that the list that we've seen for now a year, or is there other courses that are being considered? I mean, because this is coming up in all kinds of meetings, and I've still got faculty asking me how they get their name added to, like, how do we get considered for this stuff? So do we just, I think we need some clarity here.
So what we've heard on our end, Craig, is that this is the list that was put together last March or April, and as designated by the district, not by the departments or the faculty, as programs that are impossible to convert. So it's the same, I believe, and it's different at each campus. I think that there are, there's 2 impossible to convert programs at Folsom Lake College, 4 at CRC. I think we might have 12 or 13. I probably have the list somewhere for SCC. But it is the same list, and I don't know, I've never had the sense that it's dynamic. It's basically just it's been the district. If there is an argument, then their dean should have argued to have it put on the list from the start. That's how we've heard it talk to us. We have no control over the impossible to convert designation. Jason or anyone
Yeah,
else?
check out what I just wrote in the chat.
Okay.
Yeah, Craig, if I may just chime in quickly, I remember the Vice Chancellor of Education and Technology, Jimmy, and I answered this question because I asked him. And I think he said that it would have to be, in general, the way they determined at the district level what is impossible to convert normally is if it's facility dependent or not. That's one of the criteria. Facility dependent or not, one of the criteria.
But Craig, I do have the list somewhere, and I can give you SCC's list. And
I
we'll,
just posted the link to the planning document in the chat. It's there.
Yeah.
You got to scroll down a little bit.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a short list, but it will be augmented in the fall. More CTE courses like auto welding, for example.
So not the classes we as faculty said were impossible. No, Lauren, it is designated by the district.
Yeah, we have no control over that.
And yeah, I would say you send it in, you can that designation.
I'm sorry, it's Lauren. Can I do a follow-up on this impossible to convert list? So if we have schedules that we as department chairs were told to put together for being on ground in the fall, and we as faculty members know that those are not going to convert and we're not on the list, is our dean going to be letting us know when we need to turn our scheduler? I mean, like, I got to redo my schedule for the fall basically right now. So should I just call my dean and figure out how to make that work?
The district will, by March 1st, provide an announcement of what will be offered on ground in the fall. At that time, once you get that announcement, your dean will contact you, or you can contact your dean as well to have that conversation. But we're all waiting for this district announcement.
And but nothing's going to be published for students until after the 1st, because I don't want students
Correct.
thinking that some of these classes are going to be offered if they're really not.
So
Correct.
And each campus, and I'm aware, like, for example, one of the probably phone calls I'll have to make is I know that the chairs at Sacramento City College, for example, have this February 26th deadline that's floating out there for their final deadline to submit. But my understanding, that's an internal date that I'm going to call Albert and see if we can push that past March 1st. Those are some of the this is the weird messiness that is not necessarily in our wheelhouse, but we're trying to help mitigate this. And we're really, really aware of the high levels of workload and stress that this has been creating for everybody. And we know this is probably the 12th different schedule that the chairs have had to do for fall. And know that going into spring, we are hoping to be able to advocate to neaten up some of this process a little bit, particularly like by asking, for example, part-timers to redo an availability form that indicates what they're willing to teach at, that we could, if we are using these waivers, which I hope we are, given the amount of time the union spent negotiating this, that we could also put an actual physical waiver out early, so to help chairs with the scheduling. So we're not stuck with the same problem again, and we are aware of the stress related to these pieces. But my understanding is that the deadlines that are imposed internally are so that they can get everything into the system by mid-March. So nothing will be published. I can't remember the new date. Does someone know the new date? I think it was something like it's supposed to go live to students around April 5th or 6th. But someone here may know better than I do. I'm just guessing off the top of my head on that one.
Yeah, that's about right, Belinda.
Thanks, Julie. I appreciate it. So right around April 5th or 6th is when it goes live to students.
Regarding the question of district consultation with faculty to designate impossible to convert courses, there was discussion between district and faculty, although again, this has been very uneven throughout the district.
Nadine, we will try to work on, so there's also been this parallel process with a lot of forms that they've been trying to make electronic. I will also put that one on the list of things that can we convert to, you know, to do that. I mean, as much as I mean, I know Nadine and I like digging for those triplicate forms for whenever we need reimbursement and stuff, but we're hoping that goes away too. I've never been in a place where I had to file a reimbursement that had carbon paper still, so.
Can the availability form be in a more friendly format that doesn't have to be downloaded?
Yeah, so we were, so I said we could just we'll forward that one to district.
Sorry, and I know that just sounds super, super petty. It's just one of those forms that you guys know. It's a big pain in the booty to download it, and it just always screws up every single time. So it's just better if we have something more simple, but that's definitely not priority.
Yeah, well, but also we want to acknowledge that availability form is in no way useful for librarians, nurses, or counselors, and yet they use the same form. So it's a multi-layered issue there. So I just also want to acknowledge, and this was something that our colleague Teresa Aldridge has noted, like it is completely useless for counseling. So there's a lot of work in general that has to be done in that regard. So. So if most of us will be teaching online in the fall, does this mean almost all of us need to fill out a waiver? Oh no, that's the latest and greatest that we were just informed of is full-time faculty are not going to have to do anything, but if you are in those impossible to convert categories, it's not necessarily a waiver, but you want to be thinking proactively about what you can teach / do online. But for everyone else, we expect to be fully moved back on online, and the announcement will come out around March 1st is what we were told. And again, I think for those of you who came in a little late, in truth, I think we're actually just previewing a lot of what may happen for spring 2022. I'd be lying if I didn't say I was really frustrated about this process, but I'm just gonna chalk it up to hopefully we're preparing for being able to come back at a greater capacity in the spring. And like I said, our goal is number one, safety of our faculty, staff, and students. And second is faculty flexibility. Allowing faculty based on how safe they feel, based off of what you have going on relative to your own personal lives and the people you have to care for. Our goal has been to provide flexibility to go online. We're also very well aware that we also have colleagues that are totally willing to come back tomorrow. And we wanted to also be able to honor that as well. So for us, that's where we've stepped out of sort of the politics of what we're reading about and just been trying to move towards some faculty autonomy on this or constrained choice at the very least.
So thank you for working on all this. This has been so much for you guys to do, and that's really appreciated. I know this is very cumbersome and you guys have a lot of people to please and talk to, so that's much appreciated. And I just want to make sure I understand spring 2022 correctly, that it may be like, of course there's no decision, but like you guys don't expect that we're back full capacity in spring at all, right?
I don't, Jason or Julie, I don't know.
Yeah, spring of 2022 we'll be back on ground. That's my my own personal prediction.
Fully?
But
yes.
It's not 100%. I don't know that it'll be 100%, but it's all going to be based on the public health numbers. I don't know, Julie, if you.
Yeah, I would lean more with Jason. I think it will, fingers crossed, be predominantly back on ground, maybe in a different way than what we thought on ground prior to all of this. But yeah, that's the hope.
So just sit tight and let's just go semester by semester and not think too far ahead.
We have to, because it's really about public health. So
totally.
yeah.
Well, I appreciate you guys.
I would say the one thing as far as the future, whenever we are back online, people need to understand that if you do have your own health issue and you do choose to use LRCFT and the ADA and the MOUs and everything to be 100% online still, if you are an instructional teacher, your 100% online load has to be fully DE approved once we are back to a normal on-ground situation. So it is important to have those conversations departmentally to make sure that should somebody in your department need that, that you've prepared for that. The emergency DE addendum will not hold true in the future, whenever it is that we're back on ground.
I think the couple of the things I want to highlight, you know, somewhere in the millions of emails we're all getting, Chancellor King sent an email out about vaccinations yesterday. First, higher ed was excluded from the education piece, and now we're back in, et cetera. So please take a look at it. I believe there was also a link that would update you on scheduling, I believe. Jason read it a little bit more closely than I did. I apologize. Did I capture that pretty closely?
Yeah, you got it.
And then, you know, I'm seeing a few questions here that are sent to me in the chat. We are in active negotiations regarding a lot of the non-classroom faculty being able to work remote. We're very clear about the numbers. We'll keep you posted on that. Deb Crumpton, I have you in the queue.
Let me unmute myself. I just had a really quick question. You know, before we got into this environment, faculty were limited on how much of online we could teach.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering if there's any discussion as we come out of this in the spring or right now happening about, will that limit be gone? For example, you know, we can only teach, I don't know what it was, 0.6, 0.8. Will that, yeah, and I think that was contractual, right? There was a contractual limitation there. What will happen with that now, considering that many of us are teaching 100% online for 2 years?
It is also under an active discussion as well, but we are addressing non-classroom first, and then we will look at lifting that. That
Okay.
said, is I expect though that pre-tenure folks will still have some limits for a lot of different important reasons of getting to know colleagues, et cetera. Now, I also want to be clear that, and this is the district's interest, and I want to separate that out from union, is that the district has expressed an interest or a concern about faculty moving out of state because of payroll issues, et cetera. Under Ed Code, they cannot dictate where you live, but all the way that a lot of our online assignment works, and I expect to see this for classroom and non-classroom faculty, is by mutual agreement. So no faculty member would necessarily be entitled to 100% online. And it could be that your dean says one semester it's okay to be 100%, but next time they say, oh no, only 0.8, right? And the other part of it is, I think, internal to our own personal departments, we have to look at what's, you know, about what's fairness in terms of rotations and all those other pieces. So I just kind of want to put out that there's a lot of moving pieces to that 100% online you know, again, it's a lot of moving pieces, but it is under active negotiations, Deborah, and that is also on our list of things.
Yeah, I get it. I was just more curious than anything.
Yeah. So yeah, no, but it is an active discussion, and as I've seen both in private and public messages here in the box, I think that we as faculty have done an exceptional job meeting, you know, working to the best of our ability to meet the needs of our students. We've had to revisit the craft of teaching. We've had to take a hard look at, you know, when we have a melt off in our class, particularly of our Black and Brown students, about what can we do better. You know, and I think that we've done exceptional work in a time of uncertainty, right? And so I think that I'm very proud to be part of a faculty that's worked together to address these issues, but we also have some real stuff ahead of us that we need to address as well. And so I do want to note that all of the college presidents, Jason, myself, Robert, we also know that we can't address a lot of, there are some unique dynamics to every department or programs across the district. We are happy to try to schedule meetings, you know, with, it's easier for us if it's a little bit across district because the contract is one contract for campuses. To have meetings with interest groups as needed to try to address some of these issues. We have some meetings on the books that are coming up, but Also, feel free to email us. I have to say, I've been really amazed by the science faculty across all 4 campuses with the memos they've been producing about HVAC systems, et cetera. Also, if you're sending those memos to whether it's Senate or you're sending it to the presidents, just copy Jason or I on it. We always enjoy reading that stuff. It keeps us up to date on what's happening. So other questions?
I think we've caught up.
I'm gonna stop recording, but Jason and I are happy just to kind of hang out for a while. I know it's a little bit past 4.